The Nigerian government says it has no plans to remove subsidy on the importation of premium motor spirit, commonly known as petrol. And that's according to the Minister of Finance and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, who through a statement on Thursday denied saying that the National Economic Council had agreed to temporarily suspend the removal of the long-running subsidy regime. The minister said the government has no such plans, but instead intends to expand the subsidy removal committee to include teams from the incoming administration and state governors. Meanwhile, the new development seems to have cast a pall of uncertainty over the rest of the economic agenda. In another development, Nigeria's Debt Management Office says the country's indebtedness to the World Bank, which grew from $6.29 billion in 2015 to $13.46 billion in 2022, is a positive development. In a statement on Wednesday, the DMO said this position nullifies media reports about the nature of World Bank loans to the country. The agency's explanation follows an announcement by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, that the federal government has secured $800 million from the World Bank to provide post-petroleum subsidy removal palliatives. According to her, the palliatives are meant for over 50 million Nigerians ahead of the planned removal of the subsidy on petrol. DMO says that loans from World Bank come from the International Development Association, an international bank for reconstruction and development. Joining us now to look at these developments and the likely implications for an economy that is already in a state of flux is Muktar Mohammed, an economist and Chief Executive Finance Officer. Well, Muktar, it's good to have you on the program.
Always a pleasure.
The two issues are very clear.
Very clear.
Number one, what is the truth about this backtracking? We want to suspend fuel subsidy removal. Oh, we are not suspending. We are just saying we want to expand the committee. What's the difference? Why is the Minister of Finance saying two different things within a space of 2 days?
Yeah, Doctor, remember last time we talked about subsidy, I think one of your programs, I said it was because of politics they refused to take the right decision before the election. Everybody knows that the subsidy payment has become a drilling pipe. NNPC have not been able to remit money to the Federation account throughout last year, or to the fact that they are paying subsidy. When other economies in the world are benefiting from high oil price, we are losing so much because we are paying subsidy. The fact of the matter is that they say government need to pay subsidy in one area or the other for its people, which I agree. But when it comes to payment of petroleum subsidy, we've not been able to really say this is the quantity of petroleum product we consume in a day, and this is how much. There's no transparency in the subsidy regime. And most times they said, okay, we are doing this for the less privileged Nigeria. And we ask ourselves, who are the less privileged Nigeria? They are the ones in the rural areas. And as we stand to the rural area, the PMS in rural area is going between 300 to 400 naira per liter in the rural area. So the only place you see PMS as low as 185 is Abuja and Lagos. Even within Lagos, some other people are not, some stations are not even selling at 185 or 184. They sell for as high as 250. So it is not helping the poor in any way. So what we're saying about the subsidy regime, any government comes into power, they keep talking about, oh, we will get this money, we'll reinvest it. The problem I have in Nigeria is that we always think of physical infrastructure. Oh, how good the roads, how can we make the road? Nobody is thinking about social investment. Nobody is thinking of how can we make our schools better? How can we make our healthcare better? How can we begin to make Nigeria earn more into their hands so that they can be able to take care of themselves? The primary reason of governance in any society is, one, provide prosperity for the people and give them security. These are what have been lacking in Nigerian government. And all they keep saying is that it's the subsidy regime that is the problem. So for me, I've always been an advocate of subsidy must go. The funny thing is, you don't want to be happy about it, but sometimes you say it, when you decide to play politics with your economy, you didn't know one day you find yourself at that point and you need to make those tough decisions. When the then President Goodluck Jonathan made that decision at that time, we have a robust reserve. The price of crude oil was about $100, and what he was suggesting then was below what we are having now. Because of politicking, we all went to Ojota, we have a carnival, and today the same people that did the carnival have raised fuel price from the day they came, and they are now saying subsidy is not sustainable. Was it sustainable at that time?
Okay, Muktar Mohammed, I get your point. But you are saying nobody is thinking about social investment. But even the Buhari administrations saying we have secured $800 million from the World Bank, and we will use it to provide transportation, to provide agricultural investment, and to also, look after the interests of poor households and vulnerable persons in society. That's already a social investment, but you say they are not thinking about it. This same government talked about social investment during COVID-19. That may not be a fair assessment. I think the question to ask is to say what will happen to the 800 million that has been secured from the World Bank. Some people are saying that's our money that has been collected. Anytime you people want to remove fuel subsidy, that money must not disappear.
Doctor, out of the fuel subsidy, the 800 million, $57 million is for logistic. 57. 57 for logistic alone. It's insane to keep doing things the same way and you expect a different result. We've been through this road since. We've been to the road whereby you said, what when they talk about palliative, they always talk about with partner for transportation. And when they talk about transportation, they're only talking about the civil servants. They don't think about the market woman. They don't, and that informal sectors are the worst hit when you remove subsidy. It's not the civil servant that will have to come, their organized sector, they will not go on protest and government will increase their salary. What about the most vulnerable Nigeria? And who is vulnerable? How do you get to know a vulnerable Nigeria? When you talk about vulnerable Nigeria, giving them 5,000 naira, it's not in a month. And you times that, in a year, that is 60,000 naira. And when you calculate it for the exchange rate, the parallel exchange rate, or even when you bring it to the government exchange rate, for the parallel exchange is less than $100 per year. And to the government exchange rate, you are talking about maybe $110 in a year. How would that solve poverty? Okay,
from a policy formulation perspective, one of the excuses that the Buhari administration is giving is that, the government now needs to include other stakeholders, particularly representatives of the incoming administration. How do we make policies in Nigeria from simple common sense? Wasn't that foreseeable that you need to bring on board, in an election season, people who are coming, they've given the same excuse now with national population census. We need the new administration. Do we have people suffering from insomnia in government?
I think we have people that don't think, and that's why we are where we are today, because they just come up with policy for their own selfish decision. You made a policy that subsidy will go in June. You were not going to be in power till June. You knew it. Then you came, and again, if you look at the body language of the incoming president, before he even became president, he was dancing to the tune and said, look, we are going to make sure that subsidy is removed. He said it plainly in his document. And now all of a sudden he's changing the language. He's saying, look, I didn't say subsidy will be removed. We are going to look into it. We're going to find. So definitely, I think what we see in Nigerian government's policy somersault, there's no continuity in government and there's no sincerity in the subsidy regime. I say it categorically. There is still no sincerity in the subsidy regime. It's one of those government policies that have refused to go because a lot of people, especially government officials, I stand to be corrected, benefit from it, not the other Nigeria.
Okay, before I let you go, the department, the debt management office is saying, look, people should stop worrying about this so-called debt burden. That in fact, we have not borrowed enough. And that the increase in Nigeria's debt under this administration is a positive development. Despite the fact that some Nigerian civil society groups recently went to Washington, D.C. to protest and to ask the Bretton Woods institutions to say, stop giving money to Nigeria, because Nigeria, doesn't need to borrow or does not need to borrow as much. But the government is saying, no, in fact, we have not borrowed enough. We will borrow more. What do you say to that?
Well, I don't know where the debt management office is coming, because when they come, they tell you debt to GDP. That's the only thing they say. They never talked about debt to revenue. And when you borrow foreign, in 2015, what was the exchange rate? At that time, the exchange rate was between 150. The exchange rate. In 2023 now, what is the exchange rate? It's about, official exchange rate, it's about 469 naira. So what are we saying? Even just borrowing without even doing anything, the burden keeps increasing because of the volatility in the exchange rate. And now, when you borrow from World Bank, it comes with the conditions. And that is why you see the government keep on thinking of taxing the already taxed, because some of these conditions the World Bank will say, widen the tax bracket, widen the tax. But in Nigerian government, when they tell you to widen the tax bracket, they are not thinking outside of the box. Said we have an informal sector that we need to see how we can bring something to the table, get them to be paying tax. Rather, the widening of the tax bracket is to impoverish the already taxed. And because that's what the World Bank wants. So when they talk about, debt in itself is not bad. But when you borrow for consumption, $800 million is going to be borrowed. For what? 90% of it is going to go on consumption. Because you are saying you are going to give vulnerable Nigerians 5,000. How does that help the economy to grow? What productivity does 5,000 naira a month will help the economy to grow? We are not looking at the productive sector. We are not thinking out of the box. We have so many projects that can generate revenue to pay whatever debt they have. But the government is always thinking of the easy way out. Get to there. We have enough of crude oil. We have this. We do this. Borrow us the money. We'll be able to pay.
Well, unfortunately, you and I as Nigerians will not be able to stop government from borrowing more. I would like to thank you very much, Muktar Mohammed, for joining us on this Live this Sunday talk show.